The payment approval officers at Treasury were instructed always to approve payments, even to known fraudulent or terrorist groups. They literally never denied a payment in their entire careers.
All right, you wanted the deep dive on USAI, and wow, did you all deliver. We've got YouTube videos, news articles.
Even some X posts in here.
Oh, yeah, some spicy ones. Accusations are flying left and right. Opinions are strong. It feels like maybe
It seems like
even some international intrigue.
yeah, real hornet's nest we've stumbled onto here. Lots of claims and counterclaims.
So we got to be careful.
Definitely need to approach this one critically.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's break this down. USA, first things first. What is it? What do they even do?
Yeah, so USA stands for the U.S. Agency for International Development. It's how the U.S. government primarily gives foreign aid to the world.
Okay.
This can be anything from disaster relief, like if there's an earthquake somewhere or a hurricane, to long-term development projects where we're trying to help countries build up their economies or their governments, make them more democratic.
Gotcha. And how much are we talking about budget-wise?
Budget-wise, it's less than 1% of the entire federal budget.
Okay, so.
It's also important to note that USAID was created by Congress.
Yep.
It's not something that can just easily be shut down.
Right.
It would take an act of Congress to do so.
It's not nothing.
Right.
But it's also not, you know, this behemoth that some people are making it out to be. And speaking of, we've got Donald Trump and Elon Musk coming out swinging hard against USA.
Oh, yeah.
Trump called them a bunch of radical lunatics. He said,
Yeah.
we're getting them out. And then you've got Musk even taking it a step further, calling them a criminal organization, saying that USA needs to die. He even said that Trump agreed to shut it down when he was president. I mean, come on, is there any actual fire behind all this smoke?
Well, they're pretty strong accusations, definitely.
Yeah.
I think to unpack this, we need to look at, well, what's the evidence for some of this?
Hmm.
And there are concerns about transparency, accountability with USA that I think are pretty legitimate.
Right.
One of the claims that's been the most explosive is that the agency has been funneling money towards projects that seem to be advancing a particular political agenda.
Right. And some of those, I mean, those are raising some eyebrows.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
You've got Brian Mast, who heads the House Foreign Affairs Committee, is coming out and saying that USAID spent money trying to expand atheism in Nepal, promote transgender stuff in Colombia, a comic book in Peru, and drag shows in Ecuador.
Wow.
And then, you know, Musk himself is saying that USAID's payment approval officers have never denied a single payment, even to groups that might be fraudulent or even terrorist groups. Is any of this even true?
Well, I think these examples are definitely, designed to provoke a reaction.
Yeah.
And they do, on the surface, seem to back up this argument that USAID might be straying from its core mission.
Right.
But I think we have to dig a little deeper here.
Sure.
You know, what were the actual goals of some of these projects? Were they effective?
Mm-hmm.
And were they truly misaligned with USAID's objectives?
That's a really good point. I mean, the atheism thing in Nepal, that sounds strange, but if it's like to promote religious freedom in a country where certain religious groups are being persecuted, then maybe it makes more sense.
Exactly. You can cherry pick examples that sound outrageous out of context, but we can't just take these at face value.
Yeah.
We need to really, investigate those facts and analyze what the intended outcomes were, not just the, surface details.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But Musk isn't just, leveling accusations here. He's actually in a position of power. He's in the Department of Government Efficiency, and reports are saying his team was trying to get classified info at USAID headquarters. They were clashing with security officials. They issued a work-from-home order to all USAID employees.
Oh, my God.
Over 600 employees were locked out of the agency computer systems. And then you've got USAID's chief of staff, Matt Hobson. He resigned in the middle of all of this.
Okay.
What is going on here?
Yeah, it sounds like a little more aggressive than just like...
Yeah, it feels like a hostile takeover, not just government oversight.
Yeah, for sure. It raises questions like, is this the right way to handle a government agency? Is Musk being too aggressive? Or is it justified given how serious these allegations are?
Right. And what about Congress? What about their oversight?
Yeah, I was just ignoring that now.
Okay, so we've got accusations of mismanagement, possible political bias, and now this kind of like rogue agent paraplay going on. But now there's this whole other layer. There's the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Oh, boy.
Musk is saying that USAID was involved with the Wuhan Institute because of funding they gave to EcoHealth Alliance.
Right.
$800,000 specifically, and this was for gain-of-function research.
I've heard of that.
And this was later flagged as potentially dangerous by NIH officials. Okay, now we're in like a spy thriller. What is gain-of-function research?
Okay, so gain-of-function research, it's basically where scientists, they tinker with viruses
Okay.
to study how they might evolve and spread.
So they're making it more dangerous?
Well, yeah, I mean, in theory, this research can help us make better vaccines and treatments
I see.
for
Okay.
like new diseases that pop up. But it's definitely risky because you're creating something that could be more dangerous than what's out in nature already.
Got it.
It's very controversial. Some people think the benefits outweigh the risks. Other people think it's way too dangerous, especially because of a potential lab leak, even if it's a slim chance.
And that's what makes this whole Wuhan Institute connection so interesting, because there's still this debate about where COVID came from.
Right.
And some people think it could have come from that lab in Wuhan.
Possibly, yeah.
So if USAID is funding this kind of research there, that's a really big deal, right?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Especially with all this debate still going on about COVID and did it leak from a lab. If U.S. taxpayer money helped fund research that might have accidentally caused a pandemic, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, that's a scandal.
It would be a scandal.
But hold on, is there any actual evidence?
Well, that's where it gets a little murky. We know that USAID did give money to EcoHealth Alliance, and then they collaborated with the Wuhan Institute, specifically on bat coronaviruses. And we know that some of the research involved playing around with the viruses to study how they spread.
Okay.
But did USAI actually specifically fund this research?
Yeah.
And was it the type of gain-of-function research that is super risky, like what we're talking about? That's the real question.
Right.
And that's where the paper trail gets a little fuzzy.
Yeah, because I've heard people say that it wasn't actually for that specific kind of research.
Exactly. And there's debate about whether it even qualifies as gain-of-function research in the way scientists think of it. It's very nuanced. It's technical. We'd have to really dig deep into the research papers and the grant proposals themselves.
So it's kind of a he said, she said situation.
It feels that way, yeah.
You've got Musk saying, USAID did this really bad thing. And then you have scientists and government folks saying, no, it was all above board and there's no proof it caused the pandemic.
Yeah, and then you have some people saying, well, even if it didn't cause COVID, this whole thing just shows how risky gain-of-function research is and that we need to be much more careful with it.
Yeah, so how are we supposed to make sense of all of this?
Well, we need to be critical thinkers, look at the media carefully, and be skeptical. Look at where the information is coming from.
Right.
What are their biases? And don't just believe the headlines or stats that are taken out of context.
Right. We're not saying anyone is lying, but it's easy for things to get mixed up when the stakes are this high, and we just don't know everything for sure yet.
Exactly.
And science is always changing.
Right. Always evolving. We get new evidence. Theories change.
So we need to be ready for that.
Absolutely. We can't just stick with one explanation and say that's the only truth.
Yeah. So where does this leave USAID?
It's hard to say.
It feels like this whole thing has really hurt them, even if the allegations aren't true.
That's true. They're under the microscope now. Big questions about their transparency, how accountable they are, even what their mission should be.
Yeah.
They're going to be under pressure from Congress, the media, everyone. People are going to want reforms and more oversight.
So maybe Musk got what he wanted, in a way.
Yeah, he definitely got people talking about USAID.
It got everyone's attention.
He did, yeah, whether that was the plan or not.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Budget cuts, international intrigue, secret projects, maybe even pandemic viruses.
It's a lot.
I'm still processing this. What's the takeaway for everyone listening? What do we do with all of this?
I think the main thing is that this is just one part of a bigger story.
Okay.
The USAID story. It shows how hard it is to make sense of things in a world where we have so much information, but we don't know what's true. We have powerful people influencing everything, and it's tough to tell facts from fiction.
So this isn't just about USAID.
Right.
This is about how we deal with information in general.
Exactly. We need to think critically, be aware of our own biases, and be willing to have these tough conversations even when they're uncomfortable.
And we need to hold our leaders accountable.
Yes, demand transparency from them, set high standards,
Right.
and make sure they're doing what's best for the people.
Okay, well, this has definitely given me a lot to think about. We can't just sit back and let all this information wash over us. We need to really engage with it,
Absolutely.
question things, and use it to understand the world.
Well said.
And this isn't the end of the story. We'll keep following it.
Oh, yeah, we'll be back with updates.
So stay tuned.
Stay curious, stay informed, and keep sending us those sources we need them.
We'll keep diving deep with you.
We will.
Okay, so we've laid out the battlefield here. Accusations, shady dealings, power struggles, even some whispers of international intrigue.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
it really is.
But I think we need to zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture. What are the stakes here?
Yeah.
What happens if USAID gets shut down?
That's the question, isn't it? We can't just focus on these accusations. We have to think about the consequences for USAID, for America, for everyone.
Right, this isn't just moving some desks around.
No.
We're talking about aid to millions of people, global health programs, America's reputation in the world.
Exactly. USAID, it's not just some faceless organization.
Yeah,
It's real people working all over the world,
right.
doing important work, delivering services, building relationships. If it gets dismantled or even restructured, it's going to have a huge impact on all of that.
Yeah, what about the healthcare workers giving out HIV meds, or the engineers building water systems, or teachers trying to improve literacy in developing countries?
Right.
What happens to them if USAID just disappears?
That's the question we need to think about. Are there other ways to do this work? Can private groups or other government agencies take over? And what about America's influence in the world?
Right, because USAID has always been a big part of how America projects its power, right?
Absolutely. It's not just about helping people.
Yeah.
It's also about building alliances, keeping things stable, and making sure countries like China and Russia don't have too much influence.
So if America pulls back from this, who fills that gap?
Exactly. That's the question.
And what does that mean for the world? It's complicated.
Very complicated.
It feels like we're at a crossroads.
I think so.
On the one hand, we've got these concerns about accountability and transparency, maybe even national security.
Right.
But then we also have to think about the human cost, the strategic cost, if USAID goes away.
Exactly. It's a dilemma.
Yeah.
How do we fix USAID without making it less effective? Is it even possible? Or is it so messed up that we need to just start over? And what are the unintended consequences? We always have to think about that.
Yeah, unintended consequences. That's important for people to understand, right?
That's absolutely.
This doesn't happen in a vacuum. These decisions have ripple effects that are hard to predict.
Exactly. We have to think beyond the immediate outcome. What happens next? What happens after that? For example, if USAID stops funding global health programs, what happens to all the progress we've made against malaria, polio? Could those diseases come back? More suffering, more instability, especially in places that are already struggling.
And what about how this looks to the rest of the world?
Right, that's important too.
Does it look like America is turning its back on the world?
Yeah.
Abandoning its commitments?
Could be.
Will that damage our relationships with our allies?
Possibly.
Will it make our enemies stronger?
These are all things we have to consider.
It's a lot.
It is. We need to be thoughtful here, look at the evidence, and not just react based on politics or emotions.
Okay, so we've talked about what this could mean for USAID, for America's standing in the world, for the people who rely on USAID's help. But what about here at home? How are people reacting to this? What's Congress saying? What about the public?
Well, Congress is pretty much split along party lines, as you might expect.
Okay, so Democrats are not happy.
No, not really. They say Musk is going too far, that he doesn't have the authority to do this, that he's going around Congress. Senator Warren, for example, she wants an investigation. She's worried about conflicts of interest and how he's just ignoring the usual rules.
Yeah, it does feel like he's kind of gone rogue.
A little bit, yeah.
What about Republicans? Are they all on board with this?
Not all of them, but a lot of them do support Musk. They say USA is too big, too wasteful, and that it's been needing a shakeup for a long time. They point to all the accusations of mismanagement, the bias, as proof that things need to change drastically.
So the same old political divide we see everywhere else.
Pretty much.
And what about everyone else? What do regular people think?
It's a mixed bag. Some polls say that most Americans want to cut foreign aid,
Okay.
especially now, with the economy being what it is.
Makes sense.
But a lot of people also believe that America has to be a leader in the world, that helping other countries is important, and they see USAID as a key part of that.
So we've got politics, different priorities, strong beliefs. It's messy.
Very messy.
And in the middle of it all, you've got USAID trying to do its job.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
It really raises the question, how do we make good decisions when things are this complicated? How do we weigh the good and the bad? How do we make sure we're not just doing things for political reasons, but because it's the right thing to do?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
It feels like the stakes just keep getting higher and higher.
They do. And that's why we need to talk about this, have these debates, and make sure our leaders are accountable for their choices.
Well, we've covered a lot in this deep dive, and I'm still trying to process it all. But before we wrap up, I think we need to spend a little more time on this Wuhan Institute stuff.
Hmm.
It's really been captivating, to say the least.
It's definitely been a big part of the story.
Yeah, because this isn't just about mismanagement or politics anymore.
Right.
This is about national security, global health, the origins of a pandemic that changed the world. It's a whole other level.
Absolutely, and we have to be careful here. We need to take the accusations seriously, but we also can't just jump to conclusions or get caught up in conspiracies. We need to look at the evidence, the facts, and be as objective as possible.
Right, we don't want to spread misinformation or freak people out,
Exactly.
but we can't just ignore it either. If these accusations are true, we need to investigate and hold people accountable.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
We need to understand what happened, what the science says, and what it all means. So let's take a closer look at this whole USAID Wuhan Institute connection and break it down.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we're back, and we're taking a closer look at these allegations about USAID and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And as we mentioned, this adds a whole other level of complexity to this story. Now we're talking about potential global health risks, national security, the whole nine yards.
It's a big deal for sure, and we have to be careful here. We can't just get swept up in the intrigue of it all. Especially when you have people like Elon Musk making these claims, right? We need to rely on facts and evidence, not just speculation.
Right, right. So let's break it down. What are the specific claims being made here?
Well, the main allegation is that USAI, by giving money to EcoHealth Alliance, ended up indirectly supporting research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology that was, well, pretty risky, potentially even dangerous. And this was specifically gain-of-function research focused on bat coronaviruses.
And just to remind everyone, gain-of-function research, that's where scientists are actually manipulating viruses in the lab, often to make them, more contagious or more deadly. The idea is that if we understand how viruses can evolve, we can be better prepared for future outbreaks.
Right, exactly. But as you can imagine, it's pretty controversial. You're essentially creating a pathogen that's potentially more dangerous, right? So people who supported, say, the benefits, developing vaccines and treatments outweigh the risks. But other people say it's just way too dangerous, especially with the possibility of a lab leak, even if it's a small chance.
And that's where this Wuhan Institute connection gets so interesting, because we still don't know for sure where COVID-19 came from. And some people believe it could have leaked from that lab in Wuhan where they were doing this kind of research.
Right, and that's why these accusations about USAID are getting so much attention. I mean, think about it. If U.S. taxpayer dollars were actually used to fund research that might have even accidentally led to a global pandemic, that's a massive scandal.
It would be huge, but is there actually any evidence for this?
Well, it's complicated. The picture's not very clear. We know that USAID did give money to EcoHealth Alliance, okay, and they collaborated with the Wuhan Institute on bat coronavirus research, and we know that some of that research did involve, messing with viruses to see how they spread. But the big question is, did USAID specifically pay for this type of research at that lab? And was it the really risky kind of gain-of-function research?
And that's where it gets murky, right? Because there's been a lot of back and forth about whether USAID's money was actually earmarked for this kind of research at Wuhan.
Exactly. And there's even disagreement on whether that research even fits the definition of, gain-of-function research as scientists understand it. It's very technical and nuanced, and you'd really need to dig into the scientific papers, the grant proposals, all of that to get a clear picture.
So it's basically a he said, she said situation.
It kind of feels that way, yeah. You've got Musk saying USAID did this bad thing, and then you've got scientists and government officials pushing back saying, no, our research was totally legitimate. There's no proof it was connected to the pandemic at all.
And of course, you have some people saying, well, even if it didn't cause COVID, this whole thing just shows how risky gain-of-function research is, and we need to be a lot more careful.
Right. It raises the bigger question for sure.
So how are we, as people just trying to be informed, how do we make sense of all this conflicting information?
It's tough, but I think it comes down to critical thinking. Look at the media carefully, be skeptical, look at where the information is coming from, what might their biases be, and don't just buy into the headlines or the stats without context.
Yeah, we're not saying anyone's necessarily lying, but with so much at stake and so much we still don't know, it's really easy for things to get twisted around.
Absolutely, and science is always changing.
Right, it's not like we have all the answers right now.
We learn new things, theories change, and our understanding grows over time.
So where does all of this leave USA? I mean, regardless of whether these specific allegations are true, it feels like this whole thing has really hurt them.
Yeah, they're definitely under the microscope now. There are big questions about their transparency, their accountability, even their overall mission. They're going to be under pressure from Congress, the media, everyone, to make some changes and be more open about what they're doing.
So in a way, even if he wasn't trying to, Musk has kind of gotten what he wanted.
In a way, yeah. He's put USAID in the spotlight, and he's forced a conversation that maybe needed to happen anyway.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Budget cuts, international intrigue, secret projects, maybe even viruses that caused a pandemic. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of it. What's the takeaway for our listeners? What do we do with all of this information?
I think the main takeaway is that this is just one piece of a much bigger story. The USAID story, it shows how hard it can be to figure things out in a world where we're bombarded with information, where powerful people can have so much influence, and where truth can be really hard to find.
So this isn't just about USAID, it's about all of us and how we deal with information.
Exactly. We need to be critical thinkers, be aware of our own biases, and be willing to have these tough conversations even when they're hard.
And we have to hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. Demand transparency, set high standards, and make sure they're actually working for us, for the people.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for everyone listening. We can't just passively take in information. We have to engage with it, question it, and use it to make sense of the world.
Well said. And remember, this story isn't over. We'll keep following it as it develops and bring you any updates. In the meantime, stay curious, stay informed, and keep sending us those sources. We really appreciate them.
We'll keep diving deep with you.